Supreme Court today took on the right to marry someone of the same sex. They're taking on two cases over 2 days, and as with anything the court touches, anything can happen. It's up to the ruling of the 9 justices. Public opinion has been changing fast on this subject. It has moved quickly in the past few years to a place where most Americans, by a thin majority in opinion polls, most Americans now support gay marriage. But today at the court, you could hear some of the justices wondering if it's all moving too fast, as today they took on California's Proposition 8. It's where we begin tonight with our justice correspondent, Pete Williams. He was there for today's argument. Pete, good evening.
Brian, good evening. It's risky to predict what the court will do based on the oral argument, but there seemed to be no interest in issuing a sweeping decision on same-sex one way or the other.
Marriage is a civil right. Gay, straight, black or white. Marriage is a civil right. One man, one woman.
Strong passions on both sides were on full display today, with court police trying to keep the two sides apart. 2 gay couples in California, 2 women in Berkeley and 2 men in Los Angeles, are challenging Proposition 8, which stops same-sex marriage in the state.
We're no different than anyone else. We deserve the same rights. Marriage benefits us and doesn't harm you, and that's why we're here.
Arguing their case today, conservative Ted Olson, who joined with liberal David Boies, once foes over the 2000 election in Florida.
This is not a Democratic issue or a Republican issue or conservative or liberal. This is an issue of American constitutional rights.
Defenders of Prop 8 say because only opposite-sex couples can produce children, it makes sense to limit marriage to them.
That it is impossible to know with any certainty the changes that would be worked on society by redefining a fundamental institution like marriage.
But the court's liberal justices were skeptical that procreation could be a reason for denying the right to marry.
Suppose a state said, because we think that the focus of marriage really should be on procreation, we're not going to give marriage licenses anymore to any couple where both people are over the age of 55. Would that be constitutional?
The court's conservatives were equally skeptical that gay couples have a right to marry.
I'm curious, when did it become unconstitutional to exclude homosexual couples from marriage? 1791? 1868, when the 14th Amendment was adopted?
And they said though gay couples in California have all the rights of married couples, letting them be called married would be a big change.
If you tell a child that somebody has to be their friend, I suppose you can force the child to say, this is my friend, but it changes the definition of what it means to be a friend. And that's, it seems to me, what the supporters of Proposition 8 are saying here.
You want us to step in and render a decision based on an assessment of the effects of this institution which is newer than cell phones or the internet?
And Justice Kennedy, possibly the pivotal vote, seemed to throw up his hands.
You're really asking, particularly because of the sociological evidence you cite, for us to go into uncharted waters. I just wonder if the case was properly granted.
So that could be what the court does, say that it should not have taken the case in the first place because there's no clear answer. That would leave the lower court ruling intact that struck Prop 8 down. Same-sex marriage could resume in California, but there would be no nationwide precedent. Brian?
It will be so interesting to see how tomorrow's case is informed by today's discussion. Pete Williams, who will be there for tomorrow's case as well. Pete, thanks. And as we've mentioned here tonight, public opinion towards same-sex marriage has been changing so fast, almost moving 1 percentage point a year lately in a lot of polls. Most Americans now say they have a gay friend or family member. Some of the change is generational, and then there's our media culture. That side of the story tonight from NBC's Kristen Dahlgren in Los Angeles.
When Ellen DeGeneres came out in 1997,
gay woman in aisle 5.
It was front page news. Will and Grace soon brought gay men into American living rooms every week.
You still want to marry me?
Over and over and over.
Fast forward a few years to what's considered a modern family and one of the most popular shows on TV.
Oh, our game nights on Saturday. They're epic.
Over the years, television has changed the conversation about American sexuality. And what happens in Hollywood doesn't stay there. As shows created an era of acceptance, more and more real men and women came out of the closet, meaning more and more Americans now personally know someone who's gay.
The combination of knowing gay people personally
and knowing gay people through the media are convincing people that gay people are people, they have lives, they have loves, they have families.
In a recent NBC poll, for the first time, a majority, 51% of Americans are now in favor of same-sex marriage, up from just 30% in 2004. Last week, Republican Senator Rob Portman publicly supported same-sex marriage after his son came out. Of course, nearly half of Americans still oppose it.
Maybe that's the way I was brought up. You know, marriage is an institution that's between a man and a woman.
Leaving opponents now watching just as closely as Christine Hershey and Susie Van Horn, partners for 33 years and parents to Chris.
Despite strong conservative opposition,
like many, now waiting to see what happens in the Supreme Court and the Court of Public Opinion. Kristen Dahlgren,